You have reached the deepest depths of the internet. If it is greatness you seek, you've come to the wrong show. If it's about not wasting time, don't worry, you're never going to get your time back. If it's knowledge you seek, just be aware, any knowledge gained here is going to be minuscule. So now it's time for Accost the Field with Tony Gerdeman on the Ozone Radio Network. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Accost the Field. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. It is officially game week, the battle to see who will be rightly crowned the true OSU. Tom, the winner, then has to go on and play Oklahoma State in the 2004 Alamo Bowl.
Yeah, I can't wait. It's going to be time travel-y, but I think it's going to be worth the negative 14-year wait. I'm interested to see what Oklahoma State's scrappy young coach Les Miles does after that. I think he's headed for big things.
Yeah, I'm worried about going back and seeing my younger self and giving myself a lot of advice that would have helped over these last 14 years. And you know what? Now that I think about it, I don't even know if this podcast exists right now.
Oh man, I think we just tore a hole in the time-space continuum. Put the Sports Almanac back, Biff. We're really.
And I'm a pretty lazy person. I don't want to spend an entire hour doing this if it's not going to exist after we're done.
Wouldn't that be the perfect capper to the month of August? We finally have football to talk about, and nope, sorry, we broke the time-space continuum.
Womp womp. We finally got to talk to actual coaches, Ryan Day and Greg Schiano, on Monday. Players, all 7 captains, Tom, Tuesday night. And it was so amazing that everybody, Tom, was able to stick to football and just talk about football. And I mean, everybody's sticking to football by, meaning the media, because they were asked to stick to football. And Ryan Day read a statement. He didn't read a statement. He gave a statement, a lengthy statement. And, then we just moved on and started talking about football because we haven't had any of it. So there was a lot to go over. But first, after that Monday presser and Ryan Day and Greg Schiano they're done and they leave. And then you came over to me. I'm like, Ryan Day just knocked that one out of the park. And you're like, yeah, that was the biggest thing for me is he was definitely a head coach and he handled that press conference and he killed it.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a very impressive performance because it was something of a controlled environment because they had basically laid the groundwork beforehand that they weren't going to be taking questions about non-football stuff. And then he came out and addressed that in a way that made sense. It was basically, I wasn't here for a lot of the stuff you're talking about, that this whole investigation was about, so I don't really have anything to add about it. And so it was like, I think that made sense for everyone. And, at this point, everyone is so desperate to have any kind of actual news on the football team I know that's certainly all I'm interested in talking about this week, and I'm sure that that's pretty much all our listeners are interested in hearing about this week. So, yeah, I think that was a refreshing change of pace from the last month. And yeah, he did an awesome job. It was very impressive. You've heard people talk about Alex Grinch as head coach material. You've heard people talk about Ryan Day as head coach material. Grinch we saw at a press conference when he was first hired this year. I had not been around Ryan Day in a press conference setting before. We had him in kind of like those media scrums where it's just kind of a group of people standing around him. This was the first time it was, him standing at a podium and answering questions from a room full of reporters. And yeah, I don't think he could have done a much better job than he did. He looked very much like someone who was extremely prepared to do that, even though that was not something he had done a whole lot of in the last year since he's come to Ohio State.
And I mean, he was every bit the head coach. He didn't seem, his voice wasn't wavering. It wasn't, Luke Fickell in 2011. He didn't, I don't know, gravitas. He just the early on Like the projection wasn't there, or the image. I don't know what it was, but it took a while for him to look like and be the head coach. And Greg Schiano even talked a bit about that on Monday, where it wasn't until I think like the third practice where he saw Ryan Day just being Ryan Day instead of, I don't know, trying to be maybe what he thought the head coach should be. And then by the third day, he was himself. And that's when I from Greg Schiano's words, basically that's when he began to blossom as the head coach. And when you think that Greg Schiano is one of the guys who maybe people thought would be the acting head coach, and his answer when he was asked if he was caught off guard or upset about it or whatever, it was very politically correct, and that he's not going to say that, I was so mad. Basically, it was like, it doesn't matter. Ryan Day is a good coach. We're all of the assistant coaches are going to have to step up. So I thought it was a good performance by both, and Greg Schiano certainly held up his end as well.
Right. Schiano, I think Schiano would be well within his rights to have sort of expected to be the interim head coach there, but he certainly acted as if he understood why they had gone with Ryan Day. At this point, I think Ohio State has to be more perfect than perfect and avoid any kind of controversy over anything, even a little bit. And, Kevin Wilson's exit from Indiana made him, potentially a little bit untenable as a head coaching interim spot here. And, Greg Schiano, fair or not, was, the whole Tennessee thing got thrown off the tracks by, one line in an insurance deposition in regard to the Penn State thing. And, I think there's a pretty good chunk of the populace that thinks that was probably pretty unfair, but that you have to, if you have to be super careful about image at this point, then they're going to be super, super careful, and there's not that kind of lingering anything over Ryan Day. So that's I'm sure why they made that decision, but Schiano looked extremely head coach-like on Monday as well. I mean, he did it at Rutgers for whatever it was, 11 years, 12 years, something like that. So that's not really a surprise. But yeah, both of them kind of gave the adults are in charge kind of impression, which is, that's good to see. That's what you'd like to see, that it's not, a completely rudderless ship at this point.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting that on Mondays it's the head coach. It's always the head coach. And yet this Monday it was Day and Schiano out there, which I don't know if that was Ryan Day's call, if it was Jerry Emig, but I thought it was interesting that Schiano was out there as well. And Ryan Day couldn't say enough about what Kevin Wilson and Greg Schiano have done for him through this camp. And as to why Greg Schiano didn't get it, I'm also wondering about if it's just his closeness to Urban Meyer. It's like, oh yeah, Urban gets suspended, so you give the job to one of his best friends. Real great, nice job, Ohio State. So I wonder if there is also that, along with the whole Tennessee Penn State debacle. So yeah, Ryan Day so far looks like the right choice, but of course we will find out Saturday when the mighty Beavers come to town. Tom, did you know that Oregon State is going to the Pro Football Hall of Fame on Thursday in Canton?
I did not know that. That's very exciting. Have you ever been to the Pro Football Hall of Fame? I have not.
No, I didn't. No, I have not. I've driven through Canton, have never gone there. My wife has no desire to do sports things. I don't know. You've got the softball and all of that stuff, but do you and your wife go do sports things?
We go watch our kids play sports, and that's about it. That's pretty much all we do anywhere. That's with anything. I go cover Ohio State football and do we both do our jobs, and then we go travel the country watching 8-year-olds play softball. It's pretty great. Yeah,
my wife calls the whole sports writing thing. She says it's my vanity project. It's like, well, it's a little more than that. Come on.
So do you need me to tell you how terrible you are so you don't get too like arrogant about it?
Yeah.
Because I mean, I'll do it. I will help you out. I will say terrible things to you as frequently as you need me to.
No, but then what'll happen then is somebody will point out something great that you did and give me credit for it, and then I'll feel good again. I'm always here for that. So the takeaways from Ryan Day and Greg Schiano, they spelled out most of the depth chart. The depth chart was also released on Tuesday, and we can talk about that. The answer I think we were most looking for was Michael Jordan was confirmed as the starting center. Malcolm Pridgeon at left guard. The right side stays the same with Demetrius Knox at right guard and Isaiah Prince at right tackle. Left tackle could be an issue, Tom, because Thayer Munford, sophomore, who was slated to be the guy, could still be the guy, dealing with injuries in camp. So that means it could be fourth-year junior, former defensive tackle Joshua Alabi, who has been on the offensive line for 3 years. I believe 3 years. They really like him. He's never been able to crack the lineup because of, Jamarco Jones and Isaiah Prince, so no knock on him. But I wonder how good they feel right now. I guess the best thing is that they're facing Oregon State. So even if Josh Alabi gets a start and he has a rough day, or Thayer Munford gets a start and he has a rough day, it's going to be a learning process. I think the concern would be if Thayer Munford can't go, then his learning process gets started a little later and will also include TCU, which might not be that great. So if there is a concern heading into the battle with the Beavers, it's left tackle, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that is without question the single position on either side of the ball that would be the biggest concern that could single-handedly derail the season at some point. And there were certainly questions about the left tackle position coming in, off of that spring game where Thayer Munford didn't look great, and, you're going against some talented defensive ends, so Chase Young is going to make a lot of people look bad this year. So that's not necessarily in and of itself a warning sign, but the uncertainty about who was going to play on which side of the line, that Prince didn't end up moving to left tackle, Munford looking a little shaky during the spring, then Munford, who desperately needs the reps right now. We don't know how much time he missed. The first indication that we got that Thayer Munford was dinged up was when they said to us on Monday that Thayer Munford's been a little nicked up, and so Josh Alabi's been kind of splitting time with him. So, we don't know exactly how much time he's missed. We don't know exactly how he looks right now. The last impression anyone really has of him is the spring game, which wasn't great. And, a tackle position can be a big problem. That can screw up your offense faster than almost anything else. So, yeah, that to me is on either side of the ball the single biggest problem right now. Not problem, the single biggest concern, I would say, for the Buckeyes on either side of the ball would be that left tackle position.
By the way, and this is not a changing of the subject, it's still Ohio State football. Nick Bosa said on Tuesday that they are still working on who is actually in the Rushman package because they don't have defensive ends right now who can play inside, meaning that he's not playing inside, and it'll be him and Chase Young on the outside with Draymond Jones on the inside. They're just trying to find another inside guy, which I thought was interesting that, he's not going to be one of those inside guys, and it would seem that would be the easiest fix. But I remember after his freshman year, he said he didn't really want to do it anymore. He wants to be outside. He was told he'd be outside. So I wonder if maybe Larry Johnson will be like, hey, Nick, we need you inside. And obviously if they do, he'll do that. But, is there somebody else out there? Like, who would be your best guess as to who that fourth guy is? I mean, Jayshon Cornell, Robert Landers is a guy with good burst, but is he necessarily the pass rusher you want? Could a freshman even get in there? Where are you at?
Yeah, I mean, the first person I thought of was Jayshon Cornell because he's played inside before, and so I mean that would kind of make sense. It certainly could be one of the freshmen. I mean, they've talked up Tommy Togiai. I don't think it's going to be him on Saturday, but you could see him in there at some point. Davon Hamilton, maybe. But, I mean, more likely, I think, of all the freshmen, maybe like a Tyreek Smith going in there at some point. And again, I don't expect to see that on Saturday, at least not in, the first half. You may see Tyreek Smith playing quite a bit in the second half if it's 56-3 or something. But my best guess for first half who's in there on, inside in that rushman package is probably Jayshon Cornell. But, you could tell me they just keep Robert Landers in there, and that wouldn't completely shock me either. Just, don't mess with it. If it's working on first and second down and you don't have a definite answer on third down, then just keep Landers in there or Davon Hamilton.
I want to see Robert Landers, all 5'9.5" of him, rushing all 6'7" and 230 pounds of Oregon State quarterback Jake Luton. What are we going to call him? How about Luton like futon?
There you go.
Luton, and because 6'7" and 230 pounds, he can also turn into like another piece of furniture. But I want to see like Robert Landers chasing this dude down, and you see. Remember one of the pictures from this spring with that Jim Davidson or Dan Harker took with Tate Martell running away from maybe Davon Hamilton, and Tate Martell looks like he's about the size of a Star Wars action figure compared to the Rancor monster. But to see that like little Robert Landers chasing big Jake Luton and tracking him down from behind, because there's no way 6'7", 230-pound white quarterback is going to be, all that fast.
I mean, that sounded dangerously stereotypical there. I mean, look, we all lived through the John Navarre era, okay? I'm going to guess that Jake Luton could probably outrun me, but I don't know if he could outrun Robert Landers. That would be. I mean, I think if we've established anything in this podcast,
right,
it's that we want to see Robert Landers doing stuff, and whether that's catching touchdown passes or running the ball or chasing down quarterbacks, I'm here for all of it. So let's whatever we can do to make that happen. I'm here for all of that. Mostly because that then means we get to talk to Robert Landers post game, which is always an absolute delight.
Like if there was such thing as 2-on-2 football. Tate Martell and Robert Landers, we're golden. Those two right there, take on the world.
You're taking me back to like the old NES ice hockey game where you've got the really fast guy who's running around, and Robert Landers would have one heck of a slap shot. So I mean that'd be a pretty winning combination, I think.
One of the other things from Monday was that Baron Browning was announced as the starting middle linebacker. And, sophomore, obviously huge potential upside expectations. One of the top, 10 players in the nation last year, 5-star guy. 6'4", 238 pounds, runs a 4.5. The prototype at the position, at any of the linebacker positions. My concern is that, he's the starting middle linebacker, but Tough Borland was hurt. Justin Hilliard had some dings as well. So did he win the job, or did he just win the job by default? And, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt that he won the job, but there's obviously some default to it because Tough Borland couldn't. And Justin Hilliard, him and Baron Browning were neck and neck, but they've always talked about Baron as a guy they want on the field. So there's obviously something that they see in him. And, I just told you he's 6'4" and 238 pounds, and he runs a 4.5 and can probably, standing backflip out of a pool and dunk and, whatever else. But Tom, for me, I still think and I said this on previous podcasts, I'm not sold on him as a middle linebacker as much as I am sold on him maybe somewhere else, just because he's been, I guess he hasn't taken over the job maybe like he should have, or even that's putting maybe too much on him, because he's still battling Justin Hilliard, who's very good. But I guess I'm still unsure of him and how much he won this job versus how much he was just the healthiest guy at the position.
I think there is certainly something to the fact that he's the healthiest guy at the position, because it certainly sounded from what Greg Schiano said on Monday, like as soon as Tuff Borland comes back, Tuff Borland's a starting middle linebacker again. Mm-hmm. That was certainly what I kind of took from what his comments. So I think Browning is going to have a spot on this team. He's even after Borland comes back, he's going to play. He's going to contribute, but I don't know. I mean, it's almost impossible for us to know exactly how much of this was health and how much of this was clearly the number one guy who, outside of Borland, without having seen, we have literally seen zero useful practice all month. So I think that you will see Browning play even after Borland comes back. You're going to see him play meaningful minutes. You'll probably see him play in the middle, for a while as Borland sort of reestablishes himself. And then, there's certainly been talk about them moving him outside to either the Will or the Sam spot. But, Greg Schiano sort of tamped that down a little bit on Monday. Where it basically said you can't just slide guys from spot to spot and just have them, there's different responsibilities and different reads and all that. And you can't just, flip the switch and go from, okay, now I'm the Mike, okay, now I'm the Will next week. That's not quite that easy. So there may be a transition. He's going to be on the field somewhere, though, this year. He's going to have, over under on his number of tackles this year. It seems like we've established that Borland is going to be back reasonably early in the year. So you're not counting on Browning being the starting Mike all year. So, but does he get 50 tackles this year, Browning?
Yeah, I was thinking maybe like 45, the over under. I could see that because Greg Schiano has also talked about package play. Talking to Tuff Borland on Tuesday, though, he mentioned he was ready. I'm like, so are you ready? He's like, I'm ready. And I said, does that mean you're going to play? He's like, that's up to the coaches. And he just looks. He said it's going to be so hard if he can't play. And Greg Schiano said on Monday that, like, as a father and a coach, you don't want to put him in harm's way until he's ready. So I feel like I guess maybe I would be a little surprised if he would play this week, which means, that gives Baron Browning more time. But I'm with you. I think he's going to play when Borland gets back. They've rotated last year at times, and he's mentioned some rotation possibilities this week, I believe. But it was interesting when he was asked, what happens to Baron Browning once Tuff Borland gets back. And I think he said something like, now's not really the time to talk about that or something like that. And it was almost like, let's not talk about the dog that's sick. That's going to, we're going to send him off to the farm. Now's not the time. Let's be happy and just spend our last night with him while he's still here.
The really weird thing is you started saying that and I immediately said, oh, he's going to send the dog to the farm upstate. Oh no. So yes, we apparently took the same exact context from the Greg Schiano quote yesterday. So, yeah. So, he's going to play. I think that it's safe to say that when Tuff Borland is back and healthy, that's Tuff Borland's job to be the starting Mike backer for this team. I don't think there's really much question about that. But I think, he's going to play. He will have time on the field somewhere, whether that's, situationally and, maybe he's third down linebacker and Borland's in when they're anticipating run or, something like that. Or, they could move him, there's a lot of stuff in flux right now in this defense. I don't know how settled Malik Harrison is at the Will. I don't know how settled Pete Werner is really at the Sam. If they're not thrilled with what they're getting at one of those spots, maybe they do move him outside and it takes a week or two of practice to kind of get him up to speed at those spots again. But then he provides a long-term answer there. I think there's just, we've talked about this all year. All three linebacker positions were kind of in flux all year. And based on the quotes that we got from Ryan Day a couple weeks ago when they did the sort of update release, linebacker certainly seemed like the position that was still very much we don't know what we have yet. We have to kind of figure some things out. And so I don't get the sense that they're still totally settled on where everyone's going to be once Borland's back.
When you look at how unsettled they were during the spring, it's hard to imagine them being settled from day one in the fall. So, yeah, I'm with you there. You mentioned the other two starters, Malik Harrison at the wheel, Pete Werner at the sand. Werner is a true sophomore, was one of the standouts on special teams last year. And I asked both Tuff Borland and Nick Bosa about what it was that made Pete, or what they saw in Pete that they thought, helped him win the job. And what Nick and I believe Tuff Borland said the same thing. Basically, Nick said he does everything right. He whatever he's asked to do, he does it. Plus, he's big and he's fast. So when you look at last year's linebackers, which was an issue at times of doing everything right, if you've got a guy like Pete Werner in there that is where he's supposed to be, Tom, we're looking at a guy that could be there for a while, and it's going to be tough for Baron Browning to push him, especially if we consider like Malik Harrison the elder statesman of the group, even though you've got fifth year senior Dante Booker. But when we know Tuff Borland is going to be the middle linebacker, I think we agree that Malik Harrison was going to be there somewhere as well, because he was the most. I mean, he's played as both a freshman, and he played a lot last year, splitting reps with Dante Booker, and he's an example of how Baron Browning could see the field this year, because Malik Harrison, I think he started one game, but he was an integral part of the defense throughout the season. But the coaches, the players are all seemingly in on the Pete Werner bandwagon right now.
Well, and he's someone that, even last year, it might have even been before the season, Urban Meyer was talking him up. He was one of those guys that you hear coaches talking about freshmen who aren't playing, but you can tell, like, this is going to be someone a year or two from now who's going to be an impact player. Urban Meyer talked last year about Baron Browning that way. He talked about Pete Werner that way last year a little bit. And so he is someone who could be a multi-year starter there and completely seize that position. I'm kind of reserving judgment because it sounds like he hasn't totally seized it yet, if they were still sort of in flux a week or two ago. But, if you can be sound technically and be, know your role, know what you're supposed to do, be in the right place at the right time, that's an awful lot of a linebacker's job. And, he's fast enough that if you know where you're supposed to be, you can get, you're not going to get outrun at that position. So if they have someone who can just be in the right spot for them, that is going to be a big step forward from where they were quite a bit last year.
And you're right, because Dante Booker has also been dealing with some injuries. So we could ask the same question that we asked of Baron Browning. Did Pete Werner win the job, or did he just win it by default? And now, Tom, you've got everybody thinking like, well, great, nobody has won a single linebacker job on this roster. Everybody's just injured, and the least injured guys are the ones who are going to play, whether they're the best or not. So props to you. Nice job.
So when Oregon State hangs 57 points on Ohio State on Saturday, now you'll know why.
You'll know why. It was Tom's fault.
Always.
Always. Our favorite subject, Tate Martell, he was brought up as well on Monday. And Ryan Day said that he, obviously Dwayne Haskins is a starter, but the plan is to play Tate. And I've been thinking about this, Tom. You know how we think like Tate Martell would be sprinkled in here and there for a drive, or, throw him in on a couple of, a series here or a play on this series. Is there a danger in maybe ruining Dwayne Haskins' vibe or his momentum, being this is his first start? Do you want him? I think for me, maybe I want him to play like all 3 quarters, be the guy on every snap. Don't give way. Let him get a feel for everything. Let him get comfortable. And then maybe in game 2, when he's more comfortable and he's like, he can come out and take a breather in the first half and see, and let Tate Martell go in. I don't know. In the first game, even though it's just Oregon State, maybe he should just play and then let Tate Martell take the fourth quarter.
I thought about that. I think that what they might do is, if they're thinking kind of along those lines, you have Haskins play however long you want to have Haskins play. That might be a drive or 2 into the third quarter. That might be all the way through the third quarter. I don't know. But you keep him in there with the starters however long you want to keep him in there. And then you give Martell like 1 drive with the starters. So he's worked with that, that offensive line, with those wide receivers, with running backs, all that. And then after that, you put in the second team. You keep Martell in with the second team line, the second team running backs, second team wide receivers, all that. And that and that way you're not interrupting the flow of the game, but you're also giving him a few reps with those starters, and you can start working in some of the, some of the concepts that you're going to be, hopefully showcasing later in the year in a more meaningful game. I'm with you though on the idea that you do want to keep Haskins in the flow of the game as much as you can. And, maybe you do that this week, and then next week you do put a Martell in for a drive in the first half against Rutgers, just to sort of start getting him used to, okay, this is how we're going to do it. This is what it's like to sit down on the bench for a drive, watch a drive, and then have to get back up and go back into the game. Because that's, I would guess that's not what they're going to do on Saturday. But yeah, I think there's something to that, to the idea that you just want to let him just get the reps, get the experience, stay in the flow, try not to throw too much stuff at him in this first game, and then you have another game that's, you're not getting to the deep end of the pool until week 3. So give him week 1 and to do it one way, and then week 2 to sort of ease himself in a little more and do the transition back and forth with Martell, and then week 3 you're swimming for real.
I think an easy way to maybe, if they want to play Martell in the first half, is to bring him in while Haskins is in and just split Haskins out. That way, he doesn't have to leave the field or anything. And you got people wondering what the heck's going on. And then, just have some fun with that. And then also, obviously, Robert Landers at H-back. And, then we're all happy then.
You just want to put as much stuff as possible on film for people to have to start preparing for. Yeah. You think you've got us figured out, Gary Patterson? Watch this.
Who's the 67 on offense? So I'm looking forward to seeing Tate play. Obviously, I mean, we all know how good he's going to be. We'll get to see him throw the ball. We'll get to see him, run the ball, and I think it's. If Dwayne Haskins can put up 42 points in the first 3 quarters, Tate Martell 56 in the fourth, even 100,
56 points in the fourth quarter alone. Yeah, I mean
98 points.
I was going to say 42 plus 56. I don't think that's.
You go for 2 a couple of times in there, Tom.
Well, obviously, yes. As one does. I would be surprised, I think, if Haskins was in there for the full third quarter. I think. Because, I mean, I'm anticipating that this game is probably out of hand at halftime, and then, you play him kind of midway through the third quarter, and then Martell's probably in 7 minutes left of the third, 5 minutes left of the third, something like that. And then the magic happens.
No high-fiving in the press box.
I can't make any promises.
One of the things that Greg Schiano said on Monday was that we could see 4 freshman defensive linemen playing, and all 4 of those guys showed up on the initial depth chart, with Teron Vincent behind Robert Landers, surprising to me, with an Orr with Davon Hamilton, especially when you consider the reports about Hamilton in the spring and how well he was playing. So for Vincent to already be, battling Hamilton for a spot. That is huge. Tyreek Smith and Tyler Friday at defensive end were both in the 2 deep. And then obviously Tommy Togiai and Orr with Haskell Garrett. When you've got 2 defensive tackles who are already Orrs for the backup spot in a pretty deep group, I think that says a lot about obviously those guys. And I'm interested to see how they hold up in this game, how much they play, because it would seem like if you're in the 2 deep, there's going to be no reason to hold you, Tom, to the 4-game redshirt dealie.
I wouldn't think so. I think if you have your name on this depth chart, you are probably not redshirting this year. So that's Tyreek Smith is the second team defensive end. Tyler Friday's is a third team defensive end, but I would think I would expect him to play on Saturday. Teron Vincent and Tommy Togiai inside that was kind of a wow to me. Because you're right, Davon Hamilton was someone that they talked up all spring as someone who really had made a move. And that was someone that it wasn't like 1 or 2 guys had said that. That was coaches saying that was players saying that. So if Teron Vincent is already close enough to him that, they're considered basically interchangeable in the depth chart, that speaks pretty highly of Teron Vincent. And Vincent comes in with the pedigree that would suggest that, yeah, he could maybe do that. He was the number 1 defensive tackle in the country, 5-star recruit. I think he was the 20th player overall in the nation. Really, really a highly touted player. And that's a spot that you can get on the field early. There are positions where it's easier to break into that depth chart as a true freshman and places where it's harder. And defensive line is a spot where you can do it. You're more likely to do it on the defensive line than you are on the offensive line in a lot of cases. So, but yeah, I think you're going to see Teron Vincent and Tommy Togiai for sure not redshirting this year. That seems pretty certain at this point, barring an injury or something like that where they be limited time. I would certainly expect to see both of those guys playing extensively. And
also Vincent apparently, jumping Antoine Jackson at nose tackle. Of course, we have no idea if is there a health concern? Who knows what's going on? There's only, the frustrating thing about getting like one opportunity to talk to the coaches and you get one question is you've got so many and then you're done. You're like, I wonder what's going on with Antoine Jackson. And it's like, well, you're never going to know. And, so we'll see if he plays on Saturday. I think that maybe Teron Vincent. I didn't even know if he was going to be a nose guard or a 3 tech. If we're to believe the depth chart, then he's a nose now, and he's a quick guy. And when we're talking about who could be that 4th rushman, if they're looking for, if they don't have a defensive end, and you've got this, Vincent. I'm not saying he's going to be there, but it's in the back of my mind that if he's already making these kind of waves. I maybe he's a guy, but not being a quicker 3 tech, the pass rushing might not be there yet. And if the pass rush was there, you would think maybe Johnson would have him at 3 tech, but that's also, you look at Draymond Jones, Haskell Garrett, Tommy Togiai, where's he going to play? So you put him at a position where there's less depth and maybe he can get on the field.
Yeah, and there's a lot of context we don't have right now, like you said. Are guys injured, or are they just not playing as well, or are these guys doing amazing and they've completely jumped everyone? We have no context on a lot of this stuff right now, which is, it's pretty weird for this time of year to go in. The depth chart came out on Tuesday after the press conference, right? After the coaches' press conference.
Yeah.
It came out today after the coaches' press conference, but before the players. Yeah. So, there's you would love to ask Greg Schiano, hey, where's Antoine Jackson? What's going on with and we won't have that opportunity. We'll get the chance to see whether Antoine Jackson's playing on Saturday, but and then we can ask about him after the game potentially. Although, again, you have a limited amount of time, and everyone's going to want to ask a million different questions. And my questions on Antoine Jackson and Jerron Cage, and you'll get the stink eye if you ask too many questions about the third team defensive tackles. So, yeah, I'm going to be interested to see where, when they start rolling certain guys out on Saturday, because if this does get out of hand, if this is a 42-3, 51-3 kind of game, you'll have a sense for, where guys really are in the pecking order right now, and are they healthy? Because if you're playing, but you only come in for the last 5 minutes, that means you're probably healthy, but you're just farther down the depth chart. And if you're not playing, then that tells us you're probably injured. So you're gonna have to you're gonna be able to pick up a little bit from context on Saturday, but yeah, right now we're kind of flying blind on a lot of this.
And we're also having to draw conclusions that may be meaningful or may be completely meaningless. And one of them, for me, is on the depth chart, there is no Orr between Austin Mack and Benjamin Victor. And we know this is like a 6-man rotation, but there is an Orr with Paris. Actually, there's no Orr with Paris Campbell and KJ Hill anymore either. So,
nope.
Tom, I'm so confused because obviously, I was going to be so profound and say, hey, maybe Austin Mack has won the job, but now I see Paris Campbell and KJ Hill have no Orr. And we know, KJ Hill is essentially a starter. But Terry McLaurin and Johnny Dixon are still Orrs. I don't know, maybe Brian Hartline maybe he hates Orrs.
I'll let you interview him then. That's fine. Yeah, the thing that jumped out to me the most was Austin Mack and Ben Victor, because, we've talked about this doing our micro analysis on the Instagram post this year, and it seemed like Ben Victor was
he was a star.
He was the Instagram star of the month of August, and so I certainly expected that to just be as it had been. They're both in bold type with an Orr in the middle because they're both starters, and and that's how it has always been, and that's how it is, how it is now. And if you had said, that one of them is going to be the starter, based on what we saw on Instagram this month, you would certainly have assumed it was Victor. So I guess the Austin Mack Dwayne Haskins roommate thing maybe there really is something there. The Paris Campbell KJ Hill thing is weird too, because Hill wasn't he the leading receiver last year, or was he the second lead? Yeah, leading receiver last year. Letting catches, yes. And I would certainly expect him to get plenty of time, but the depth there is just crazy, because just at the H spot, there's Paris Campbell, there's KJ Hill. So Paris Campbell, who's potentially like an 800 or 1,000 yard receiver this year, KJ Hill, who was a leading receiver last year, CJ Saunders, who they think enough of that they put him on scholarship this year, and then you also have Demario McCall and Jalen Gill behind them. The depth at H is just insane this year. So I certainly expect all of those guys, at least Campbell, Hill, Saunders, to receive, to play meaningful minutes and have probably multiple catches on Saturday. But I guess we have set the expectation all summer that Paris Campbell is potentially like one of the breakout guys on this team. So maybe that's what the coaches are seeing too. And it's not that KJ Hill has fallen back, but it's just that Paris Campbell has set himself so far apart that he's clearly head and shoulders above everyone else.
And Campbell said Tuesday night that he felt last year he was average, and that he obviously shouldn't be average. So he believes he is one of the top receivers in the nation this year. And maybe that's what the coaches have seen. I've had people asking, where's Demario McCall? And anytime the H-back position comes up, I tell people it's the deepest position on the team. So if you don't see somebody, it's because the guys ahead of them are really good. And I was watching the Penn State game, was on Big Ten Network, the 60-minute version. And CJ Saunders was out there when the game was, Ohio State's trailing by 15 or whatever. So he's not going to be out there if he's not really, really good. And yeah, I think there were I think maybe KJ Hill or somebody had to leave, but they still trust him, and he still produced. And, all we ever saw from him last year was production when he came in. So, that's a deep group. Getting back to Victor and Mac, you mentioned the Instagram stuff. Victor, maybe Benjamin Victor is like an Instagram model, and Austin Mack is like a real model, right?
I've only seen them fully clothed, so I don't know if I can make a real judgment on that. But
okay, fair point. Sticking with the receivers, Chris Olave was the lone freshman receiver in the 2 deep, and actually he's the 3 deep behind Terry McLaurin and Johnny Dixon at Z. It was either Terry or Johnny Dixon asked about Olave, and it was Dixon, and he said he does everything. He can do anything, and he can deep whatever he can catch and make people miss. He's just Johnny Dixon came in pretty advanced, and he had a really good spring before he got hurt, and he was mature. And Urban Meyer said those same things, and Tom Herman did as well. And Johnny Dixon said, Chris Olave came in, and he's more advanced than Dixon and McLaurin and Paris Campbell. They've talked about that, how he's more advanced than they were at that same stage. And this is Johnny Dixon, who had a spring, as a freshman as well. So I definitely, he's going to play, and it'll be fun to see what he can do, and what he brings to the offense. Because I think there's a chance, Tom, that he's not just a guy who plays late in the games, but he's a guy that could give them something that maybe they don't have.
Yeah, he'll be interesting to see how they deploy him, because, I mean, you had mentioned a couple of weeks ago that a coach saying that he looked really good and was very useful on special teams, which that means if you're going to play on special teams, you're going to be out there all 12 games. So if you're going to be out there all 12 games, you're not going to redshirt. So then you really can, earn your spot on offense as well. I don't know if people really understand how significant that is to be a wide receiver who comes in as a true freshman, who's not an early enrollee, who just comes in during the summer and immediately is on the depth chart before the first game. Wide receiver, I mean, there's kind of a hierarchy of positions that, running back is traditionally one of the easier places to step on the field and make an immediate impact. If you think back to, all the true freshmen that have been like immediate impact guys at Ohio State, you think of Maurice Clarett, you think of Robert Smith, you think of J.K. Dobbins. They're all running backs. Think of true freshman wide receivers at Ohio State who have been immediate impact guys. I mean, there is not a 1,000-yard receiver like there is a 1,400-yard J.K. Dobbins last year as a true freshman. That's just not a position where you can just immediately step in and make an immediate impact. So for Olave to come in, not have been here in the spring, just show up in June, and immediately week 1 he's on that depth chart. That is, I mean, you don't have to read the tea leaves very closely to see that is a big glowing arrow saying, hey, this guy's probably going to be pretty good pretty soon. And the 2 guys ahead of him on that depth chart, Terry McLaurin and Johnny Dixon, they're both seniors. So this time next year, that could be his starting job at Z. So, yeah, and they're going to want to get him reps this year because they know that's his job next year, potentially. They're going to want to get him reps and have him kind of as ready as they can to be the number 1 guy there next year.
You mentioned him like showing up and coming out of nowhere. It reminded me of Willie Mays Hayes in Major League, and I'm wondering if like Olave, like first day of camp or whatever, was they pranked him and they put his bed out, onto the practice field, and then once Mickey Marotti's whistle starts blowing, he gets up and he's just like running the best routes you've ever seen. It just blows everybody away, like right out of the gate, and so that would be a pretty amazing story. So thanks for that inspiration, Tom. That's a great possibility.
Who's the Rick Vaughn on this year's Ohio State football team?
Tater?
That's always a good answer.
Who's the Dorn? I'm trying to think like.
Well, I guess I just in terms of who's old, I can go with Johnny Dixon there, 5th-year guy. Doesn't look a lot like Roger Dorn, but
No.
they both veterans.
The safeties was another interesting topic because Greg Schiano declined to say that Isaiah Pryor had won a job, and instead saying that he and Jocelyn Went will continue to battle for it, just as Jordan Fuller and Eric Smith did last year. And if you'll recall, Jordan Fuller started every game last year, so he was always the starter. Isaiah Pryor is listed as a starter here and does not have an Orr. And Jocelyn Went and Josh Proctor, the freshmen, are connected with an Orr. And I know we put so much stupid weight on these Orrs, but they're out there. We have nothing else to go on. Please, people, humor us. But I think it's significant that Isaiah Pryor is listed as a starter. What Greg Schiano is doing, in my mind, is he's telling Jocelyn Went, you can still have this job. It's still up for grabs if you want to go get it. But as I've expected since, we talked to Isaiah Pryor and the team at the Cotton Bowl last year, this was always the plan for Isaiah Pryor to start, and I expect him to start. And if he can do, what Jordan Fuller did last year and keep the job and play well, then the Buckeyes have hit a home run here. And I don't know if he'll be Jordan Fuller, but I expect him to keep the job.
That's certainly been the kind of the default assumption all along, has been that this was sort of Pryor's job to lose. No, none of the coaches would say that, but he was kind of the next guy up on the depth chart last year, and he had the recruiting pedigree that sort of suggested he should be the next, great safety at Ohio State. And so I this wasn't a huge surprise. I was only kind of surprised at the fact that he was, delineated as the only starter here based on what Schiano had said one day earlier, where, it sounded like it was still an open competition. But yeah, I think that what's going to be maybe more of a competition to watch in the coming weeks is Jocelyn Went versus Josh Proctor for that backup job. Because Proctor is someone who, again, he is like Olave. He's coming in the summer. He was not one of those spring early enrollees. He's coming in the summer, and he's already on that depth chart as, kind of splitting that second team spot. So, once he's had more reps, later in the year, maybe that backup job is his. I would be more surprised to see Jocelyn Went as the first team safety than the third team safety by the end of the year, I think.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And Josh Proctor was another one of those guys that was talked about on signing day, like Jeremy Ruckert, Nicholas Petit-Frere, who, Meyer expected to see in the 2 deep, and we've seen him, I guess in the 3 deep technically, but Jordan Fuller was in the 2 deep as a true freshman, and Isaiah Pryor was in the 2 deep last year as a true freshman. So it would not be a surprise to see Proctor, and maybe he stays in Orr, him and Went stay in Orr the entire time. But it's Proctor who has moved ahead, and we'll see that as the season plays out. I'm looking at the rest of this depth chart. Johnny Dixon and Demario McCall returning kicks. I asked Johnny Dixon when was the last time he returned a kick, and he said it was in high school. I asked him if he ever took one to the house, and he said no. So I don't know. We all love Johnny Dixon, but if you can't even return a kickoff for a touchdown in high school, what are you going to do in college?
Not returning a kickoff for a touchdown. That sounds like he qualifies to return kicks at Ohio State to me. I don't know what else.
Come on, Tom.
That has too soon.
Too soon. Not cool, man.
We had the over-under on how many kicks Demario McCall was going to return for touchdowns a week or two ago. So, maybe Demario McCall is going to take them all, and then Johnny Dixon's just back there to be like, yeah, good job.
By the way,
I don't want to take any of yours because there's a bet on this podcast
Right.
I listen to.
Yeah.
And yeah.
The backup long snapper, Bradley Robinson, do you know where his brother is a long snapper at?
I'm about to disappoint you and say no. No, I do not.
The University of Michigan.
Ooh.
Yeah. It's a story that could be
his
written, but do you really want to write a story about two long snappers? No offense to the long snapper nation listening.
Not after Camp Check-in Day, no.
Oh, we should delete that part. I mean, just the entire long snapper discussion is, that's not cool. Well, anyway, gosh darn it. Those poor long snappers. Because they're good people, you can trust them. I bet, who are you going to go to if you want somebody to babysit your kids, Tom? A long snapper or a linebacker?
What kind of neighborhood do I live in this kind of situation? Because a linebacker could, if you're worried about like security issues, I think you'd go with a linebacker. But if you need, you want someone to play with your kids.
Liam McCullough is 6'2", 230.
Yeah, that's true. But I don't. If you had me handicap a fight between Liam McCullough, who's 6'2", 230, and say Malik Harrison, who's 6'3", 245, or Baron Browning, who's he's listed at 6'6", 250, but I think we determined that wasn't right.
What about Keandre Jones? Look where he's listed.
Yeah, 6'2", 288, which
explains why he's not starting.
He has perhaps put on 40 pounds of bad weight, or perhaps there's a typo on the depth chart. Who's to say? I think I'm going to take my. If you're going to handicap a fight between a linebacker and a long snapper, I think I'm going to take my chances with the linebacker. That's all I'm saying.
Why do you always go to violence? I'm talking about babysitting. You're talking about but what about if they fight?
You don't have kids. That's why you don't.
It always goes to violence. So Ohio State is playing Oregon State this week. Tom, what do we know about Oregon State? I'll tell you what I know. I don't know a lot about Oregon State. One of the interesting things is, they have Jonathan Smith as their first-year head coach. He was the offensive coordinator at Washington the last 4 years and a quarterback's coach. The Oregon State quarterback's coach and offensive coordinator Brian Lindgren came from Colorado. So what the defense has been watching so far has been Washington and Colorado tape. I'm sure they'll get to some Oregon State tape, just personnel and things of that nature and the skill players and to see what they do. But for the most part right now, they're looking at Washington and Colorado, the defensive guys. Defensively, Oregon State runs a 3-4, and that used to give Ohio State trouble. And I don't expect it to give them trouble this week.
I think that's probably a reasonably safe guess that Ohio State's not going to have a ton of trouble this year. The guy in the middle, I mean, you mentioned the quarterback earlier. If you have one guy you should watch, and on the defensive side of the ball for Oregon State, it's their nose tackle. He's 380 pounds, which is, I'm pretty sure that's not a typo. So his name is Elu Aiden, which, 380 pounds is, if you have a 380-pound defensive tackle, you can run a 3-4 because he is going to plug some gaps in the middle. So that was kind of the one fun guy that looking through their roster, he looked like someone who might be fun to just keep an eye on individually, just play by play for a little while. You mentioned the coaching staff coming from a couple different places, and they're watching Washington film, they're watching Colorado film. There's a possibility that Oregon State comes out and has, on that first drive, they move the ball, they pick up a couple first downs. That's because Ohio State won't know what to expect. They'll probably come out in something pretty base and just sort of see what Oregon State's going to do. So, if Oregon State picks up a couple first downs or, kicks a field goal on the opening down or, heaven forbid, scores an early touchdown, don't freak out too much. That's that's something that will probably correct itself with time once Ohio State sort of gets a sense for what Oregon State's trying to do and kind of adjusts back to that. Because the personnel this is not a fair fight personnel-wise. This is an Ohio State team that recruits in the top, 5 in a bad year in the nation and the top 2 most years, going against Oregon State, which recruits in the 60s-ish a lot of years. Plus, you've got a new coach putting in a new system, kind of a transition year. This is not going to be a game. You're not going to see a lot of stuff from Oregon State that's going to look real impressive. And I mean, on the defensive side of the ball, they were a tire fire on defense last year, like an absolute tire fire. So, again, you've got new coaches, you got new schemes on that defensive side of the ball. It's not going to look great early. So don't be surprised if Oregon State could do something real early in the game to, Oregon State 3, Ohio State nothing, or something like that. Like, that wouldn't completely shock me, but I don't think it's going to take very long for Ohio State to seize control of the game after that.
And keep in mind, they'll be running their scripted 15 plays or whatever, so they've been working on those plays. They could have been working on them all summer long in that script, or deciding what they want to do. So they're going to have a plan. They're going to be working those plays that they've been practicing and that they feel will execute well. It reminded me of Greg Schiano on Monday saying, mocking defensive coordinators who say, we set the tone on the, we don't care what an offense is going to do. We set the tone. He's like, you can't do that. You've got to, if they spread you out, then you have to go spread out. You've got to react to what they're doing. And so, yeah, there'll be a feeling out. You just wonder if how Oregon State plans to handle the pass rush. Is it going to be a lot of quick passing and things like that, which the Buckeyes see quite a bit of. Defensively, first offensively for the Beavers, their left tackle, left guard, and center are all returning starters. The right side is new. Quarterback Jake Luton, I think, started like the first 4 games last year and then was hurt. So he's got some, he's got some experience as a starter. Defensively, though, I think they have like 2 guys who were established starters last year. They've got a bunch of other guys who have started, but nobody, they've got like 2 starts here, 3 starts here. One guy had like one of the safeties has 14 career starts, but only like 2 consecutive. So, I don't know. Did he get hurt? Did he get benched? That would require, Tom, more research. And I think I've already done quite a bit of research just based on everything I've already said.
More than this game deserves, I think, is a safe answer. If you want to know everything you need to know about Oregon State. I mean, last year was the year that Gary Anderson, the former Wisconsin coach, quit in the middle of the year. So that kind of leads to a year turning into a tire fire. But they had 1 win last year. They were 1-11. The only team they beat was Portland State, which that was a team that went winless in FCS. And Oregon State's win over Portland State was 35-32. So they had a come from behind 3-point win against Portland State, and that was the extent of their their list of glorious triumphs in 2017. So the only other game of note last year was the season finale. They played arch rival Oregon at Oregon and lost 69-10.
I'm kind of annoyed that you're trying to steal the joy of that Portland State win. Those players fought for that win, and you're acting like, like they didn't even deserve it. I'd like to see you go out there and beat Portland State, Tom.
I think Portland State might have been one of those teams that beat Washington State in one of those recent years when, like the annual Mike Leach. Wait, did they just lose to another FCS team? I'm pretty sure Portland State was one of them. I think Eastern Washington got them once, and Portland State got them once. But yeah, this was not the this is not the Portland State Vikings that we all know and love, that were are a competent a competent FCS team. This was an 0-11 team. So not the vintage Portland State excellence that we've all come to know and love.
Not a respectable team, a funny team.
If anytime you can go 0-11 in FCS, you've really done something spectacular.
They need to schedule a couple of Division II teams next time out. I think that about covers it, Tom. Is there anything else that we're missing on Oregon State, the Buckeyes, what we saw on Monday, what we saw on Tuesday? Anything that your extensive notes have not touched on yet?
Not really.
Not really.
We didn't. We haven't touched on the series history. Ohio State leads the series 2-0 with a 22-14 win in 1984 and a 51-10 win in 1974. So both of those years, Ohio State had 1974. Ohio State had a running back that won the Heisman Trophy. In 1984, Ohio State had a running back that should have won the Heisman Trophy. So this year, either Mike Weber or J.K. Dobbins will either win the Heisman Trophy or they should have won the Heisman Trophy. And now I'm blanking on the name of the Boston College quarterback, but whoever he is, he'll win it. It's not A.J. Dillon; he's their running back. The quarterback. He'll win it if J.K. Dobbins or Mike Weber doesn't. That's I think the big takeaway from this. That
would be a huge takeaway. But if the Boston College quarterback, whoever he may be, does win the Heisman, you heard it here first from Tom Orr, even if he didn't know the name of the guy. So I think that's a great example of this show, where we say crazy things without knowing who we're talking about.
The best example of this will be 5 minutes from now when we've both completely forgotten that we had this conversation. So that'll be the absolute best example of this show.
And why did we forget? Because it ceased to exist because of the time travel we talked about earlier.
Boom. There you go. Full circle.
And good night, everybody. Seriously, though, I think we're done. So thank you all for listening. It's game week. Enjoy yourselves. Don't worry about talking to your coworkers. Just stay in the zone. Don't talk to your family. Who needs them? You've got football. This will be out on Wednesday morning. Thursday, there's football, Northwestern and Purdue, and other football. And then Friday, there's more football. And then Saturday, it's the Buckeyes. And then, 3:30, I don't know. Tom and I will be on the field doing Facebook Live after the game, and we will miss like the first half of whoever's playing. But then, we're going to work real hard so that I think we can both get home to watch Michigan and Notre Dame at 7:30. And Tom, it's here.
It is here. It's the most exciting week of the year. The week that ABC shows a bunch of really grainy standard definition video and talks about games that happened 30 years ago to try and get you pumped up for Michigan Notre Dame. Can't wait. My favorite fall tradition.
Yeah, let's end on that one. So thank you, everybody, for listening. Make sure to check out the rest of the shows on the Ozone Radio Network. And right now we've got a schedule of Monday will be the Buckeye Sloopcast. Tuesday will be the Silver Bullets with Michael Citro and Chip Minnick. Wednesday is this show, Accost the Field, with me and Tom Orr. Thursday it will be Sons of Schmidt with Brandon Zimmerman and Mike Meals. Friday will be another edition of the Buckeye Sloopcast. Not the same edition as the Monday edition, a full another edition on Friday. Saturday, you don't need a podcast because there's a game. But what Tom and I are doing is when we do our Facebook Live, which goes from 30 minutes to 45 minutes, to sometimes we lose track of things and goes longer than that. But the plan is we'll record that with some like lapel mics, like almost professionals. And then when I get home from the game or whatever, I'll upload that as basically as a Sunday morning, Saturday night edition of Accost the Field for you. Going over the game, what we saw, what the players said after the game. And Tom, if the sound works out, I think that's a pretty good Sunday deal.
I think that, I think that's win-win. Not very much extra work for you and for me, and the listeners get more of our nonsense. I think that's I don't know who could possibly think that was a bad idea.
I like that slogan. Less work, more nonsense. We might have a title of the show right there, of tonight's show. Less work, more nonsense. So we'll go ahead and really end it. Thank you all for listening. Make sure to subscribe on whatever platforms you use. Feedback and ratings are always welcome. And we will talk to you after the game. Have a good night.
Well, she threw away the motel key. I wish it never meant nothing to me. Say it well, now say it well. Oh yeah. Say it well, now say it well. If you tell me that tomorrow's alright, we could steal a car and leave tonight.